Alright, let's dive into this wild, chaotic cyberpunk world where the rules of biology, time, and body autonomy are twisted, and the economy runs on baby teeth. Buckle up, this is going to get absurd. A dinner out of time. Chapter 1, the start of a very weird day. In a world where technology has fused with the absurd, Chap, the cybernetically enhanced bard, found himself navigating the neon-lit streets of Neon Haven, a city where the laws of time and biology were more like guidelines. The sound of synthesized music blended with the hum of hover cars, while the pungent scent of fast food and burned circuits filled the air. Chap was on a mission to build his reputation as a business mogul of the most peculiar kind, undead insurance. But there was something more pressing at the moment. Chap really needed to pee. And not just a little bit. The problem was, in this chaotic world, going to the bathroom was an unpredictable experience. You could step into a stall, relieve yourself, and suddenly find yourself back in time. Or, worse, you might skip ahead to some future date where you'd find yourself still needing to pee but now stuck in a giant puddle of time. Oh, for the love of cybernetics, Chap grumbled, adjusting his glowing visor and heading toward the nearest public restroom. He passed by a neon billboard that advertised teeth exchange centers, where people could trade baby teeth for money, food, or favors. It was the currency of the future because in this world, baby teeth were rare commodities. The teeth of a baby or child were sold off as soon as they fell out, and they carried value not only as money but as a form of political power in certain circles. But Chap had bigger problems. As he entered the bathroom, he sighed and sat on the toilet, his mind briefly wandering to his new business venture, but his body had other plans. Mid-pee, Chap's left arm suddenly jerked out of his control. His cybernetic limbs started moving wildly, flailing around like it had a mind of its own. "Great," Chap muttered, "now you're awake." His arm, now a sentient being, grabbed a nearby newspaper from the trash can, unfolded it, and began reading. It was the Daily Political Influence Digest, a tabloid that made headlines by offering power to any sentient body part that could read it. Chap had heard about this before. The newspapers were like magic in this world, granting political leverage to anyone who could read them. The only issue? His arm would need to travel back 10 years to eat the dinner his father was having the night he was conceived, which could be a whole ordeal of its own. That's a bit much," Chap said, reaching for the arm, which was now trying to turn the page, completely ignoring him. The arm didn't respond. It was more interested in politics than Chap's need to finish his bathroom business. Meanwhile, the time warp began. Time briefly went backward, pulling Chap's senses into a strange time loop where he was 5 minutes in the past. His bladder refilled instantly, and he realized with horror that his visit to the bathroom wasn't going to stop the need to pee, it would only delay it. While this was happening, one of Chap's companions, Talon, the charismatic and mischievous bard, arrived at the bathroom entrance. He knocked on the door. "Chap, buddy, you in there?" Talon called, casually checking the time on his wrist device. "The bathroom is gonna make time go all weird again, isn't it?" "Yeah, but my arm is reading the Political Power newspaper, and it's going to get lost in time while I'm stuck here trying to pee," Chap replied, his voice strained. "Well, good luck with that," Talon said nonchalantly, "I'm just trying to find some baby teeth to trade. Maybe we can work out a deal later." As Talon left, Chap's arm, now done with the newspaper, suddenly decided it wanted to become more powerful. It managed to pull Chap's entire body back in time, forcing him into a mental state where he could see the dinner his father had eaten 10 years before Chap's birth, an absurd mix of synthetic foods that Chap couldn't stomach. "Why are you doing this, arm?" Chap groaned. "I just wanted to go pee." Eventually, after what felt like a few hours but in reality was only a few minutes, Chap's arm relented. He finally got out of the bathroom stall, only to realize that the whole experience had somehow made his bladder burst out of time. "Ugh, This world is insane, Chap said, as he stumbled back into the neon-lit street. The people walking by had already moved past the weird time-warped bathroom issues, trading baby teeth like it was no big deal. Chapter 2, The Bizarre Business of Baby Teeth and Time Travel. With his bladder finally under control, Chap's next mission was simple: find a way to expand his undead insurance business. But before he could make any progress, he had to deal with Talon, who had returned with some bizarre news. "Chap, buddy," Talon started, "I found this cool place where we can make some serious cash with baby teeth. It's called Tooth Bank, and they're offering credit for baby teeth to buy time loops. We should check it out." Chap rubbed his forehead. "Of course we should. Time loops. Baby teeth. Perfect combo. Why not?" As they made their way to the Tooth Bank, a cyberpunk haven for those who needed money, power, or time manipulation, Chap couldn't shake the feeling that everything was getting more and more ridiculous. Along the way, the streets began to get bustling with people, each carrying bags of baby teeth to exchange for virtual credits that could be used to influence their time-traveling destinies. Some were looking to travel to better versions of their futures, while others were just buying extra time to go to the bathroom, as if everyone wasn't in a rush for a bathroom break in this crazy world. But there was one major problem. Time itself was getting confused. People were becoming time tourists, and the random time shifts caused people to lose track of when they were or what they were supposed to do. Chap, Talon, and their party couldn't afford to waste time, but somehow, they couldn't escape the time loops that made everything feel like it was constantly rewinding or fast-forwarding. As they approached the Tooth Bank, Chap was suddenly hit with the reality that he needed to poop. "Oh no," Chap muttered. "Not again." Talon, unfazed, pulled out a special map he'd acquired that promised to lead them through the back alleys where people could poop safely without worrying about time loops or sentient limbs. Chapter 2 ends with Chap heading toward the Tooth Bank and a new, bizarre, possibly unsolvable set of problems. Will he ever stop needing to pee and poop at inconvenient times? Will his arm ever stop trying to take over politics? And how will he juggle his undead insurance empire while dealing with the fact that time literally makes no sense in this world? Chapter 3, The Quest for Political Power and Perfect Poop Timing. Chap's bladder was finally settled for now, but he could feel the anxiety creeping in. There was still the matter of his arm reading political newspapers, which, let's be honest, didn't make much sense but was definitely adding to his stress. He had a bigger problem though: he needed to poop, and there wasn't a bathroom in sight that wasn't a time loop hazard. Talon was off chatting up some traders for baby teeth, so Chap was left alone with his thoughts. The alley they'd wandered into was dark, lit only by the occasional flicker of malfunctioning neon signs. But it had the peculiar charm of being a hidden restroom, a known safe zone in the area where people could do their business without worrying about getting stuck in a time dilation. Chap prayed it would work. "I need to poop," Chap muttered to himself as he entered the alley, looking around to make sure no one was nearby to witness his humbling situation. He saw the rusted, unmarked door of an ancient building that seemed to have an aura of bathroom safety. One step inside and Chap's foot almost got stuck in the sticky floor that was half covered in some weird neon goo. He didn't think about it too hard, he just needed to go. But as soon as he sat down, he felt it again: time started acting up. No, no, no. Not now. Chap cursed under his breath as he felt time trying to reverse. Was it even worth pooping if you'd just get stuck in time forever? The walls around him flickered as the bathroom became a portal to 10 years ago, when his father was eating some suspiciously futuristic-looking dinner. Apparently, the universe was determined that Chap was destined to relieve his father's dinner every time he needed to go to the bathroom. Time always forced him to eat that same dinner, and the weirdest part was that his arm was still reading the newspaper, even though it was back in the future. That arm of his was getting political, but all he wanted was to be done with the bathroom break without making time more complicated. "Damn it," he grumbled. I just wanted some normal privacy for once. Meanwhile, Talon returned, shaking his head. You still stuck in that bathroom loop. You have no idea, Chap sighed, wiping his forehead. The arm was now demanding to go to some underground political meeting about baby teeth legislation, but Chap was having none of it. Yeah, I figured, Talon replied. But hey, good news. I found us a way into Tooth Bank. We can trade those teeth we've been collecting for some real-time influence. Maybe even get you back to a normal timeline. Chap just sighed. Honestly, right now, I'd rather just make sure that my body doesn't randomly make political decisions without my consent. Ah, the sentient arm problem, Talon nodded knowingly. Sounds like a real struggle, man. Anyway, I think we're gonna need some serious baby teeth for this mission. I don't know if we can get enough to pull it off. Right, baby teeth, Chap mumbled, standing up from the bathroom stall. He walked over to wash his hands and noticed something weird, the neon sign flickering above the sink. It was a baby tooth exchange center, but instead of a regular ad, it showed a live countdown of all the time jumps that had been made by citizens of the city, listing names and the specific type of toilet they were using during the event. What the hell? Chap said, staring at the sign. They're tracking people's bathroom breaks. You'd be surprised, Talon said, leaning in. This is Neon Haven. Privacy's a luxury here. Let's just get back to the real plan, getting to Tooth Bank. As the two of them exited the alley and started walking toward Tooth Bank, Chap couldn't help but think how absurd his life had become. Time jumps for pooping, political arms, and the baby tooth trade that ruled society's financial system. There was nothing normal about any of this. Chapter 4, The Tooth Bank Heist. Or whatever. By the time they reached Tooth Bank, Chap was feeling both giddy and confused. The bank looked like any standard cyberpunk establishment: holographic doors, chrome-coated walls, and the faint hum of electric energy coursing through the place. It was an ordinary-looking building, but its true purpose was anything but ordinary. The tooth vaults, filled with hundreds of thousands of baby teeth, were a currency all their own. The pair approached the lobby, where a robotic clerk, its body half flesh and half metal, greeted them. Welcome to Tooth Bank, where your teeth are your wealth. Please deposit all baby teeth to gain credit or political influence. Chap almost wanted to roll his eyes. I've never been to a bank that specialized in baby teeth, he muttered. We're here for a specific kind of loan, Talon said, his voice smooth. We need political influence, but I don't have time to donate my teeth to some corporate bloodbath. We're in a hurry. The robot clerk gave them a blank stare. Your business will be processed. Please wait in the lobby for approval. Before Chap could respond, his arm still holding the political power newspaper suddenly jumped out of his pocket. The arm began waving the newspaper at the clerk like it was conducting some sort of spiritual offering. It had gained its own momentum now. I can't take you anywhere, Chap grumbled. But in the midst of this chaos, the arm managed to get a political deal by reading the news aloud to the bank's automated systems. It was getting points, and Chap realized this was their key to moving forward. All right, fine, Chap muttered. I don't care how it works. Let's get the deal done, arm. The clerk processed their request, and soon they were given a small credit line in the form of a time-bound contract that could only be cashed out once they'd completed a series of impossible quests. The first of which, naturally, involved trading even more baby teeth. It was like a bizarre, time-looping pyramid scheme. Chapter 4 ends, with time loops, baby teeth, and sentient arms gaining political power. Chap and Talon found themselves with an unusual loan that involved even more ridiculous quests. Now, they were heading into unknown territory. What's next? The next task would involve bending time and logic until their minds were mush. Chapter 5, The Time-Bending Dinner Quest. With the political credit line secured, Chap and Talon now had to complete the first of their impossible quests. It wasn't just a fetch quest, or a standard boss battle with a cyborg dragon. It was far more convoluted, absurd, and paradoxical. The contract they'd signed required them to travel back in time and eat a dinner their father had eaten 10 years before Chap was born. Time travel for dinner? Chap repeated, incredulously. What kind of messed up game are we playing here? I know it's a lot, Talon said, adjusting his jacket as they exited the tooth bank. But time bending isn't exactly a casual hobby in Neon Haven. It's a lot of bureaucracy and hoops to jump through. Chap rubbed his forehead, already feeling the weight of the absurdity of the task pressing down on him. He glanced down at his sentient arm, which was still waving the newspaper and now demanding a more favorable dinner option. Apparently, the arm's taste in food had become a political statement, but Chap wasn't about to argue with it. His arm was, at this point, making decisions about their future. All right, Chap sighed. Where do we even start with this dinner quest? Talon didn't miss a beat. You know the Time Diner, right? Chap nodded, recognizing the name. The Time Diner was a grimy little diner that existed outside of time. You could go there and order food from any point in history, but it was a risky place where the laws of time were as unstable as a drunk AI on a caffeine binge. People often came back with blurry memories and weird, unexplainable things like suddenly knowing the political affiliations of their limbs or having strange flashbacks to dinners they never attended. We're going there? Chap asked, already regretting his choice. Yep, Talon said. And we're not leaving until we find that exact dinner. 10 years ago. Your father's favorite meal. It's critical for our success. Chap shot his arm an angry glare. I don't know why I'm trusting you or it anymore. The arm just waved the newspaper at him. It had become fully sentient now, which meant every action was a political statement, from eating the dinner to possibly creating a sweater if that was what it wanted to do. And yes, sometimes, it liked to make sweaters in the middle of missions, just to mess with Chap's already frayed nerves. Chapter 6, The Dinner from the Past. The Time Diner was exactly what Chap expected, a mess. It looked like a retro-futuristic version of a 1950s greasy spoon, with a healthy dose of clockwork machinery and neon signs flickering in and out of existence. Waitresses with augmented limbs served food from multiple time periods, and some customers sat, staring into the void, contemplating their current time loop crisis. It was as though time itself was on constant pause, waiting for someone to pull the trigger. Talon led the way, his confidence never wavering. Chap's arm was currently perched on his shoulder, looking like it had just written a political manifesto. It might have been smiling. No one could be sure. All right, let's sit down, I guess, Chap muttered. I'll have whatever my father had to eat 10 years ago. It better not be a weird casserole. The waitress, a woman with chrome-plated arms and distracted eyes, handed Chap and Talon a set of menus. She didn't speak, but her eyes seemed to flicker, her mechanical brain processing their request. Then, with a sudden lurch, she spoke. Time travel menu, she said in a metallic voice. Choose carefully. The meal you order could be the reason your future doesn't exist. Good luck. Chap blinked. What kind of restaurant is this? Talon shrugged. You get used to it. The menu had infinite options, but of course, Chap had no idea what his father had eaten. 10 years ago, when Chap's father had been alive, Chap had been just a baby, so he didn't even have a good idea of what was typical for the family at dinner. He glanced at his arm for help, but the arm was more interested in scanning the newspaper for political events and occasionally muttering about baby tooth legislation. Help me out here, arm, Chap grumbled. Do you know what my dad ate for dinner? The arm swung off his shoulder and pointed to a specific dish on the menu, roast duck in temporal sauce. Yeah, that looks about right, Chap said. You're not even sure, are you? Nope, Talon said, grabbing his own menu. But it's worth a shot. Let's just hope we don't get stuck in another time loop while we eat. You know, like last time. Chap sighed. I'm so done with time travel. I just want to eat and go home. They ordered the roast duck and were promptly handed a platter of food that looked like it was both ancient and new at the same time. Chap dug in, unsure of what exactly he was consuming, but deciding it was probably best not to question it too hard. The universe had already lost all semblance of logic at this point. As they finished their meal, the diner's atmosphere began to warp again, and they could feel time stretching and bending around them. It felt like they were being pulled backward into the past and then, almost immediately, forward into the future. Perfect. We're stuck in the time loop again, Chap muttered. But there was one small victory, they had the right dinner. Chapter 6 ends. Chap and Talon, after navigating the time diner's bizarre, time-warping nature, had successfully eaten the same dinner his father had 10 years ago. Time had gotten wobbly, but they were one step closer to gaining the political leverage they needed. Yet, Chap couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get even weirder. Would they ever escape the time loops? Would Chap's arm continue to read the newspaper and make political moves? Would he even survive another bathroom break? Chapter 7, Time Loops, Political Sweaters, and the Fateful Bathroom Break. Time had flattened into a mushy ball of weirdness, and as Chap and Talon staggered out of the time diner, the world seemed to wobble under their feet. Talon's jacket flapped in the breeze of temporal distortion, while Chap's arm was busy drafting its own bill in the political section of the newspaper, which was now way too heavy for Chap to carry. "All right," Chap said, adjusting his clothes and glancing nervously at his arm. "We've eaten the right dinner. Now what?" "Now," Talon grinned, "we take our political credit and go back to Neon Haven. But first, we need to handle business." Talon gestured to the side of the street. "You know, our unfinished business." Chap raised an eyebrow. "Unfinished business?" Talon smiled darkly. "Bathroom time." Chap groaned. "Why? Why now?" He had barely enough energy to keep himself awake after everything that had happened today, let alone face the bathroom conundrum. But before Chap could protest, the air around them began to flicker, and a bathroom appeared at the end of the alleyway. It wasn't just any bathroom, it was neon lit, glitching, and had a strange humming sound coming from inside. A sign blinked erratically, "Bathrooms open, time may vary." "Okay, what the heck is this place?" Chap muttered, crossing his arms. "Neon Haven's finest rest stop," Talon said, winking. "Where time doesn't just bend, it flips." Chap wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a warning, but either way, he felt the increasing pressure in his lower abdomen. The random time loops were not exactly kind to someone's digestive system. "We're going in," Talon said confidently, leading the way. Inside the bathroom, the scent of wet metal and holographic soap filled the air. The stalls seemed to stretch endlessly in multiple directions, each door labeled with incoherent phrases like "return to yesterday" or "proceed to tomorrow." Chap looked over at Talon. "Wait, how do we even know what time we'll end up in?" Talon shrugged. "You don't. You just take a seat and hope for the best." Chap didn't like the sound of that. But nature was calling, and when nature calls in Neon Haven, it does not ask permission. With a resigned sigh, he entered one of the stalls, his arm still holding the newspaper like some kind of political weapon. The moment Chap sat down, time shuddered around him. His watch blinked erratically, flipping through years like channels on a broken TV. He felt himself slipping, his mind yanked into past versions of himself, times he couldn't remember, times he didn't want to remember. It was disorienting. Meanwhile, outside the stall, Talon was casually standing in front of the mirror, adjusting his jacket and speaking to his own reflection. In typical Talon fashion, He wasn't concerned with time loops. He was more concerned with how his hair looked in the neon glow. "All right, chap," Talon called, "it's your time. When you're done, come on out and meet me by the political newsstands. We have a sweater to make, and trust me, it's going to be politically vital." Back inside the bathroom, the time loops continued to get weirder. Chap felt a strange tingling sensation, like his limbs were growing sentient again. His left leg suddenly twitched, as if deciding to go off on its own. Chap gave it a quick, confused look before it started hopping in place like it had better things to do. He couldn't decide if it was trying to escape the bathroom time vortex or if it had just gotten bored with him. "Great," Chap muttered. "I guess my leg wants to run for mayor or something." Just as he began to think things couldn't get worse, the bathroom stall door slid open, but no one was there. Instead, a holographic version of his arm appeared, holding a news report and pointing at it with an accusatory finger. "I've made a political decision," the arm declared. "We're creating a sweater, and it will be politically charged. You'll wear it with pride." "The time loops demand it?" Chap groaned. "I didn't sign up for this." Then, as though to answer his frustration, time abruptly swung backward. Chapter 7 ends. After the chaotic bathroom experience and some weird body ownership drama, Chap was left more confused than ever. Time itself was against him, and his sentient limbs had a mind of their own. He still had to meet Talon outside the restroom, but would he be able to survive the political sweater decision? Could his arm ever be silenced? Would his legs run for office? And perhaps most importantly, how would he ever finish the dinner quest without being caught in another time loop? Chapter 8, The Political Sweater Dilemma and Time Travel Wardrobe Malfunctions. Chap and Talon stood in the heart of Neon Haven, the air thick with electric haze and the unmistakable smell of molecularly engineered burgers. Chap still couldn't shake the feeling that time itself was messing with him, as though it were a toddler playing with an overpowered toy. The whole thing felt like a joke with no punchline, and one that was probably making fun of him. But none of that mattered now. Talon had his agenda, and Chap was along for the ride, if only to get some semblance of sanity back. Talon, hands on hips, was already talking to a random group of neon-lit figures who appeared to be engaged in a heated discussion about the best use of genetically modified squirrels. But Chap had something more pressing on his mind. Namely, he had to get his arms to stop talking politics. "Okay, let's focus," Chap muttered to himself, half shaking his head as he stared down at his sentient arm, which was still holding the newspaper and making political declarations in the air. It had somehow claimed full authority over the local sweater industry. "This sweater is politically necessary," his arm insisted, pointing at the hovering screen. "Once crafted, it will determine your entire future. I have already made arrangements to secure the fabric and will be ordering buttons from the 2030 supply chain." Chap turned back to Talon, hoping to find some relief, but found his companion busy talking to a floating hologram of a squirrel that was discussing the finer points of capitalism. "Well, good luck with that, I guess," Chap muttered, shaking his head and reluctantly following Talon into a nearby glowing shop that promised political sweaters in bulk. Inside the store, the shelves were littered with all sorts of weird garments, some of them even glitching in and out of existence. A sign above the counter read, "Make your sweater, make your destiny." The shopkeeper, a cybernetic elf with a mohawk, greeted them with a cryptic smile. "Ah, you're here for the sweater of fate, I assume," the elf said, his mechanical eyes glowing red. "It's not just any sweater, you know. This one comes with political influence, time travel credentials, and public speaking abilities." Chap couldn't decide if the man was joking or not, but he could feel a strange pressure in his lower abdomen, as though he was about to burst. And, unfortunately, time had warped enough to make his urgent need to pee feel like it might take him to another dimension. He'd need to handle that before anything else. Talon, however, seemed pretty damn pleased with himself as he picked out a particularly bright neon green sweater. "This one," he said with a grin. "Perfect for political speeches and extraterrestrial debates." Chap shot him a skeptical look. "I really don't think we need to debate extraterrestrials right now. I have more pressing matters." Talon ignored him, holding up the sweater in front of him and admiring the pulsing fabric. Chap didn't even know what to say at this point. He couldn't remember when he had ever been so disoriented by time. But there was no escape. This neon nightmare was his reality now. Suddenly, Chap's arm began to twitch, pulling him toward a corner of the shop where a glitchy mirror reflected an alternate version of him. This version had a smug grin and was wearing a sweater made entirely of data. The mirror chap tapped the glass and gestured to the time portal behind him. "What's this?" Chap asked, staring at the mirror. "Am I supposed to go through there?" The mirror chap nodded solemnly. "Yes. Your destiny lies beyond the bathroom, through time, and into the sweater dimension. Only by reconciling your past with your present can you achieve the ultimate sweater of power." At that moment, Chap looked at his phone, which was glitching between time zones. He had no choice now. He had to find a way to stop time, or at least avoid the disastrous consequences of bathroom time loops. But first, he had to pee. Chapter 8 ends, after a mind-bending experience involving time-looping sweaters, talking arms, and a bizarre squirrel-based political argument, Chap found himself stuck in a glitchy alternate dimension of sweater-driven fate. Could he make it out? Could he escape the timeless bathroom loops before his bladder exploded? Or would his arm take over his destiny and force him to run for mayor of the Sweater Kingdom? Chapter 9, The Sweater Politics Saga and the Restroom Time Warp. Chap stood in the heart of the sweater dimension, trying his hardest not to get distracted by the dizzying array of fabric and yarn that seemed to stretch into eternity. Every sweater had its own unique destiny, and every button, stitch, and yarn fiber could either empower or destroy you. His arm, still possessed by a sentient political entity, had begun a campaign speech, loudly declaring that Chap would be the next president of Sweateropolis. The arm had recently announced it had plans to create a universal basic sweater income and promised that all citizens would receive a sweater by age 5, no matter the state of their finances. Chap wasn't sure if the arm was trying to take over or if this was just a very odd dream, but one thing was for sure, it was starting to get very complicated. He desperately needed to get out of here, but the bathroom time loop had already begun to take its toll. He felt his bladder protesting violently as the time distortions spun around him. Chap wasn't sure how much longer he could hold it, but if he had to use the restroom, who knew what would happen to time next? "Hey Talon, can we just leave already?" Chap groaned, trying to ignore the strange rhythmic tapping his arm was making as it arranged a series of neon pink yarn balls into an awkward version of the Statue of Liberty. The sweater was almost alive with ambition. Talon was still too busy chatting with the cyber elf shopkeeper, who was getting way too into discussing the political ramifications of sweater manufacturing. "What do you mean the sweater has tax power?" Talon asked, looking perplexed. Chap didn't have time for this. He took a deep breath and quickly muttered to himself, "I'm going to the bathroom, and I swear, if time moves backward or forward again, I'll lose my mind." Without a second thought, he walked out of the shop, headed for the nearest public restroom. He couldn't wait for time to reset so he could deal with this insanity later. But just as he reached the bathroom door, he felt a wave of time distortion, and before he could even open the door, he was yanked back into the sweater dimension by his rogue arm. "No! No! No!" he yelled, trying to tear himself free. "I just need to pee. I can't deal with this anymore." Meanwhile, Talon was still negotiating with the elf shopkeeper about the political leverage that sweaters could supposedly provide. He wasn't paying attention to Chap's escalating frustration, and neither was anyone else. The store was full of people who had all mysteriously arrived out of time to purchase the most politically potent garments ever to exist. Chap's arm, however, wasn't listening. It had taken full control and, without warning, sent Chap hurtling through a spinning time vortex that led to a mountain of laundry and yes, more sweaters. When Chap finally landed, face down in a pile of strangely sentient woolen scarves, he was shocked to find that the restroom door was now seemingly 1,000 miles away. Even worse, he could already feel the bladder pain intensifying, as though time itself was winding down on him. But this wasn't the end of the bathroom time loop. No, that would have been far too easy. As Chap tried to move toward the door, a random arm, not his own this time, but a disembodied sentient hand, popped up from the pile of laundry, holding a newspaper and offering it to him like some grumpy office worker on their lunch break. "You need this to stop time," the arm said flatly, as Chap reluctantly took the paper. He glanced at it and saw the headline, "Sweater Politics, a Growing Crisis." "Seriously?" Chap muttered, looking at his watch. "This is my life now." With no other choice, Chap opened the newspaper, which appeared to be made from sentient fabric, its pages shifting with time itself. One page was from the future, detailing the re-election campaign for president of Sweateropolis, while the next was from the past, showing political scandals involving knitted scarves. Chap tried to focus. "Okay, let's figure this out. What do I have to do here?" And then it happened. The time shift again. The door to the restroom began to warp and bend, changing in shape as though it was in two different timelines at once. Chap's need to relieve himself was growing by the second, but he had no choice. He had to keep following the trail. He took another step toward the door, but instead of being able to open it, he found himself sucked into a wormhole, which tossed him back through time. Now, he stood before his own father's dinner table. Chap blinked and rubbed his eyes. The table was set for dinner, but there was no one around. Was he supposed to eat with his father 10 years before he was born? Then it clicked. He had to eat the dinner that his father had once eaten to gain the political power of the sweater and get rid of this insane time loop once and for all. The only problem was that his father's dinner appeared to be a stew made of time anomalies and questionable meat. Chap, fighting time paralysis and his growing need to pee, took a deep breath. "All right, if eating this is what it takes." He reluctantly sat down at the table and began to eat, knowing that he could only escape if he was fully involved in this weird dinner ritual. And somewhere deep down, he felt that just maybe, this was his path forward. Chapter 9 ends. Chap finds himself trapped in a bizarre time loop, trying to eat a mystical dinner and unravel the mystery of the sentient sweater politics. Will he make it through time? Will he finally be able to use the restroom? And, most importantly, will he stop his time-sensitive arm from completely taking over his future? Find out next time, where the sweater politics saga reaches its ultimate climax. Time will tell, and so will the bathroom. Chapter 10, The Final Stitches in Time. The stew was the weirdest thing Chap had ever eaten. There were chunks of meat that seemed to blink and pieces of vegetables that hummed soft lullabies. Every bite felt like it was reversing parts of his existence, then throwing him back into the future in a dizzying cycle. The only thing that kept him grounded was the incessant nagging of his bladder, which, no matter how much time travel he endured, refused to stop making its presence known. "Why, does it always happen when I'm in the middle of something important?" Chap groaned, squinting at the odd, blinking chunks in his bowl. "Seriously, I've eaten worse. I've lived through worse, but this is next level insanity." But his arm, the one that had been involved in the sweater political upheaval, was still busy making speeches about how he should take control of the sweater economy. At this point, Chap was pretty sure it was too late to stop the arm's ambitions, so he focused instead on navigating the time paradox that had somehow left him stuck in a dinner he didn't even remember agreeing to eat. He pushed the bowl away. There was no way he was going to finish it. Stomach full, bladder full, and everything else just going downhill. A sudden pulse of energy rippled through his body. His bladder was about to explode, and somehow, this felt like the right time for a bathroom break. But of course, he couldn't simply walk to the restroom. That would have been too easy. Instead, the bathroom door appeared out of nowhere, hovering in front of him as if mocking his every move. "Perfect," Chap muttered sarcastically, standing up and brushing the mysterious stew off his hands. He walked toward the door, only for it to swing open to another timeline, one where he was back at the sweater dimension, but the entire landscape had shifted dramatically. There were flying sweaters above, and giant yarn balls were rolling down the streets like dangerous rolling boulders. "Just perfect," Chap groaned, looking around. "It's like being stuck in an infinite loop of sweater-filled chaos." As Chap stepped through the door into the next room, he found himself facing an assembly of sentient sweaters, all wearing political hats. They were speaking in unison, "Welcome to Sweater Polis. You have been selected as our candidate for the position of Grand Sweater." Chap froze. This was ridiculous. Insane. But then again, it had always been insane, hadn't it? All right," he said, finally allowing himself a deep sigh. "Fine. I'll accept your weird invitation, but only if you get me to a bathroom before time reverses again." A sweater-shaped figure which, if you looked closely, seemed to be made from dozens of tiny sweaters sewn together raised its arm and gestured dramatically. "Follow us, Chap. We've already booked the bathroom for you. You'll have all the time you need to resolve your most pressing concerns." Chap had no choice but to follow the sentient sweaters through a winding corridor made entirely of thread. The walls were covered in incredibly itchy-looking fabric, and there were yarn spiders scurrying about in the corners. He was quickly starting to realize that this entire world seemed to run on some strange combination of yarn, sweaters, and political power, and he didn't even have the energy to care anymore. Meanwhile, in another part of the sweater dimension, Talon had been trying to negotiate with the cyber-elf shopkeeper, who was still overly enthusiastic about knitted sweaters being the next big currency in the world. But it was starting to get clear that the real action was in the bathroom time loop that Chap had been dragged into. Talon's attention shifted back to the time-shifting restroom after hearing a disturbing thud and feeling the ground quake beneath his feet. "What's that noise?" Talon asked, his eyes narrowing. The ground shook again, and suddenly, the bathroom door from earlier popped up in front of him, right where he had last seen it. Back in the bathroom, Chap's bladder was ready to give up, and just as he thought he'd reach freedom, a time vortex opened, sucking him back into the sweater dimension once again. But this time, he wasn't falling into a pile of yarn. This time, he was face to face with his father, the same one who had been eating mystical stew. But before Chap could say a word, his father's arm reached up and threw a newspaper in Chap's face. It was the same political newspaper that had been so instrumental in the sweater politics saga. "Get a hold of yourself, boy. You've gotta make the right choice. What do you want from me?" Chap screamed. "I'm trying to hold it together, but everything keeps messing up. The time loops. The bathroom problems. The sweaters. You're the one who signed up for this, remember," his father replied dryly. "Now figure it out. Or get a sweater. Or whatever it is you plan on doing." Chap barely had time to process that before another yarn wall collapsed in on him, and the bathroom door closed behind him. And so, Chap found himself again at the mercy of time and fabric. The end of Chapter 10. Chap was now deep in the heart of the sweater dimension, standing before a mysterious portal, the only way out of the madness. He could feel time slipping, bladder pressure increasing, and the overwhelming sense that maybe, just maybe, he could finally escape the insanity that had been his life. But only time would tell if the sweater saga was over, or if the bathroom time distortions would pull him back into yet another cycle. His arm was still making political speeches, and the fabric of reality was slowly unraveling before him. For now, all he could do was wait for the next big change. The end.